What's up, everybody? Welcome to a sad edition of Morning Cup of Hockey. Not just because our audio wasn't working on YouTube earlier, which Jeremiah actually did DM me and inform me that this is a YouTube issue right now, and other shows are dealing with it as well. So, Vic, you might be off the hook for right now.
Not off the hook.
But this is Morning Cup of Hockey presented by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. So use our code NATION, NATION. And Vic is saying it's StreamYard. It's not YouTube. But we got Jeff Marek joining here shortly. Then we got hopefully Pat Maroon a little bit later. It's been a disaster of a morning so far. We're pretty upset about it because we want the chat. We miss the chat. We love the chat, as Jeff knows, as you all know. And let me just kick off the show with this, because we're going to talk about a lot of different topics today. But, Jeff, I want to ask you, because I know Colby's answer. I feel like I know Colby's answer.
Okay.
Would you rather be a fan right now of the New York Rangers or the Buffalo Sabres? Because they're two completely different feelings.
Right now, the New York Rangers. I would rather be a fan of the New York Rangers because unlike the Buffalo Sabres, the New York Rangers have not had 13 years of futility and frustration. Did you see the guys last night at the game? Sabres losing a shootout to the Detroit Red Wings. The guys that came with bags over their head and the guys that were throwing palm trees, like blow up palm trees on the ice after the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that sometimes James Dolan is not the most popular guy in the world, but no one's chanting "Where's Dolan" at MSG. Yeah. They're chanting "Where's Terry?" Like it is for the Buffalo Sabres guys. It is torches at the castle gate. That's what it's like and it's still. But the thing is, like, I keep seeing these texts like tweets last night. Okay, this is rock bottom. It's not rock bottom yet. You know what rock bottom is in sports? Rock bottom is not refusing to buy a ticket to go. Rock bottom is buying a ticket but refusing to go. That to me is rock bottom. Sabres aren't quite there yet, but they're a lot closer than the Rangers. At least the Rangers still have some hope here. I know I'm talking to someone who is feeling that.
Well, the root of the question is false hope versus no hope, and I just don't know which one's worse.
Well, listen, Igor Shesterkin still plays for the New York Rangers. Adam Fox is not long removed from a Norris Trophy. This team is not long removed from an Eastern Conference final. I mean, I don't think big picture that it's even in the same realm of things, Johnny, when you're talking about.
No, it's not even close. It's not apples to apples at all.
And fans go through their different stages of grief. You know, there's anger, there's sadness, there's empathy, there's disinterest, and you just kind of roll through those different emotions. And Buffalo is so much further down the list of emotions than a New York Rangers fan, which is more short-term anger.
I have Ottawa Senators fans right now chirping me, and I have no response to them. I can't even chirp back because what am I supposed to say? There's nothing I can say. It's that bad. It's
Sens fans are feeling it. Red Wings fans are feeling it. Like those three, right? Like that group are waiting for one to sort of break away from the pack and distinguish themselves, and it's just not happening. I know if you're a Sabres fan, you're actually feeling like this team is going backwards and that there's really no end in sight, right? Like out of all those three teams, Detroit, Buffalo, and the Ottawa Senators, which one do you think is in the worst predicament right now? I will go Sabres all day.
Yeah, me too.
And I say at the beginning of every year, because I grew up in Southwestern Ontario. I grew up watching the Buffalo Sabres and hearing the voice of Ted Darling and the French Connection and Edwards and Sauvé and I've been with the Buffalo Sabres, not from day one because I was 3 years old when they came into the NHL, but I've been someone that's followed the Sabres my whole life. I just want them to be good again. Please, I say it every year, and it's 13 years of futility.
Well, Tyler Yaremchuk and I got into this a little bit on Daily Faceoff Live yesterday, and we talked about the poll question was who's got the most hope from those three teams, and you know, even with the fact that they do have some pieces in Buffalo locked up, you know, you've got your defensemen, a couple young, high overall, draft picks. You've got a forward or two up front. You just don't have a lot of confidence in the people that are making the decisions. And so where does that go? Where does that take you? I mean, the inactivity and the inability to really bring the right people in to run the organization. I mean, it seems like it's a real problem. And luckily for the city of Buffalo, they have the Buffalo Bills right now, because the Buffalo Bills look primed to potentially go win a Super Bowl, because they are nice people in Buffalo. Like, I don't think anybody's ever
too.
I don't think anybody's ever gone to Buffalo and said, geez, like the people here turn you off. Like, they're nice people in that part of New York. They really are.
Yeah.
I have all the thing about the Sabres to me as well on the ice, and I know like they've identified who their core is and they've locked them up, but everywhere that I look on this Buffalo Sabres organization, and we can get to off ice in a second, is inexperience. And to me, the story of the Buffalo Sabres is too many kids rushed into the NHL too soon. Like, look at the AHL or lack thereof. Look at the AHL experience of these kids that they're banking on for the future. Like, I've still yet to meet the player that was hurt by spending a little bit extra time or any time
No such
in
thing.
a hockey league. It
No
doesn't
such thing.
exist.
But Jeff, do you think
But-
it's because they needed some excitement? They needed big names to rally around. They needed
But that's a
youth
poor
energy?
way to do business, because you're
It's
just
a-
hurting
it's a-
They were
yourself.
desperate. They were
That-
desperate.
But that's like being penny wise and pound foolish. Like, keep your eyes on the long game here, right? Like, keep like I will say one thing about Detroit. Like, there's a lot of good players at Grand Rapids. I mean, the Detroit motto used to always kind of chuckle, because they used to say like, oh, the Detroit Red Wings like to overripen their prospects in Grand Rapids. Like, Valtteri Filppula can't find a spot and Uri Hoodler can't find a spot. And I used to always say to myself, well, it's a murderer's row in Detroit. They're not keeping them down there because they're trying to overripen them. They just, whose spot are they going to take? Right? You got Datsuk and Zetterberg, like, and Lidstrom and Rafalski. Like, no one's taken those spots. But the one thing that you can look at is there's a lot of players on GR that are spending a lot of time in the American Hockey League. That to me is a more sound investment than plunking them in the NHL right away. When they come off their ELC, you say, this is going to be a piece of our core, and you lock them up to big ticket 7 or 8 year deals. That to me is a recipe for disaster. But then off the ice too, like when Kevyn Adams came on as a gentleman, like, I don't mind out of the box thinking and out of the box GMs, but there has to be some type of veterans around them. And he brought how many people from the Academy of Hockey there at KeyBank, where he's running that program and close to the Pagula family, and how many of them like left the organization or were dismissed within a year? And outside of Jason Karmanos, who has a very impressive resume and is considered, a veteran in this industry, the story of everyone in the Buffalo Sabres organization that has come in is inexperience. There's no senior advisor. Like, there was a while there where Kevyn Adams was like the lone manager, like no one else around at all.
And Jeff, didn't he, correct me if I'm wrong here, didn't Kevyn Adams get this job when he was working on the business side of the organization? Like, he was
running the Academy of Hockey.
Right. Okay.
Out of KeyBank, and that was his calling card to get into the Buffalo Sabres organization. Like, again, like, I want to stress this. I don't mind out of the box hires. Like, I'll tell you a story. Like, and I still have in one of these hockey news magazines that have boxes out here in the corner. Like, I remember when Lou Lamoriello was hired by the New Jersey Devils, and that was considered an out of the box hire, because at that time, people from college didn't get hired into the NHL. It was like, who's this guy? The Providence Friars, like, it's like running this team like a college. This is the NHL. Like, who is this young whippersnapper Lou Lamoriello? He's now considered like, we all know how Lou's considered in the history of the game. But at that time, even Lou Lamoriello, much like Kyle Dubas a few years ago with Toronto, was considered very much an out of the box hire. So I don't necessarily mind that at all, that it was Kevyn Adams that got the job, but there has to be like some experience around him and around the organization.
And let me read this. Let me just read this to you guys, because I knew there was something. So in 2011, Adams was named an assistant coach of the Buffalo Sabres. He was fired on May 9, 2013, 2 days after Ron Ralston was named as their head coach. Ron was actually my coach at the U.S. National Development Team. He's now assistant coach at Providence. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is what I was alluding to. Adams was named senior vice president of business administration for the Sabres in 2019. So yes, he was running the academy. He had this position within the business side of the organization and operation. And having worked within a few organizations, I can tell you this: there's not usually a lot of synergy between business ops and hockey ops, like at all. Now, there's always people that work in the business side of the organization that think the hockey people are idiots and they could do a better job. And so, listen, I don't know Kevyn Adams. I've never met Kevyn Adams, but the circumstances around going from a senior VP of business administration right into the big chair running the biggest part of your organization, that seems kind of suspect to me. Like, was he an advisor to the owner? Was he in the owner's ear? Was he trying to push Botterill out the door? These are things I don't know the answers to. I'm literally just thinking about what I've seen. It's all strange to me, Jeff.
Well, Botterill and Tim Murray didn't have much success before him either. Like, those are two
No,
guys.
I agree. Totally agree.
So you have to go in a different direction somehow, right?
You do, and I don't know, like a lot of the quote unquote mistakes that have been made, like you can't really undo them right now. Like there's a new pool to swim in here, and ultimately, I don't know what's going to happen to Kevyn Adams with the Buffalo Sabres. I think what they need is, I mentioned this in my blog, like what they need right now with vis-a-vis their fans is a charm offensive, but that's not coming because it's always bad when they are chanting, fire the coach or fire the general manager, but like they're chanting, "Where's Terry?" Like this goes right up to the owner's box.
Yeah.
Like, where is Terry? And we can all remember when Terry Pegula bought this team, and he's got tears in his eyes because Gilbert Perreault is in front of him, and he's saying, Darcy, spend. There's our job to win the Stanley Cup, and the first thing they did was overpay for Christian Ehrhoff and Ville Leino. And I understand you buy a shiny new toy, and everybody wants to spend money. You want to do something with it. When really a smart thing probably would have been just to leave the thing alone.
But here's my next question, Jeff.
Okay.
Sorry to cut you off there. I didn't mean to do that.
Fine.
But
no.
Do you feel bad for Lindy Ruff, or is he a part of the issue this year as well? Because I'm on the team where this is the team this guy inherited, and he inherited all these issues. What can he really do with that?
There was always the feeling. There's a feeling that long term Seth Appert's going to be the coach of this team. Did a wonderful job in Rochester. Would have coached a lot of the players that you do see on the Buffalo Sabres, and still some good ones that are on the horizon. So I wondered, and I think a lot of us did too. Okay, so Lindy Ruff comes in on a 2-year contract. Seth Appert gets the promotion to the Buffalo Sabres. Is that are we seeing is that going to be the succession program here? Look, I wonder how much. Not just Kevyn Adams, but Terry Pegula had to do with the Lindy Ruff hiring. Let's not forget here. Let's never lose sight. Terry Pegula has always been a massive fan of the Buffalo Sabres, right? And any chance that, one of his big initiatives was to help the Alumni Association and do more with the alumni in Buffalo. That had always gotten the sort of short end of the stick. I can't tell you how many ex-Buffalo Sabres players I've talked to who have said, Terry's awesome. Terry's great. He has an adoration for the alumni. He really loves the history of the team. He grew up a fan, etc. Has a genuine affinity towards all of us. I do wonder if part of the program here was Terry Pegula was, I'm not saying told Kevyn Adams to hire Lindy Ruff, but that as far as having a thumb on the scale, I wouldn't be surprised if Terry Pegula had a lot to do with this one. But at the same time, too, I think the long term is probably Seth Appert coaching this team.
Yeah, he's obviously he's got a bright future. It's funny, I know Seth because he was the head recruiter at Denver when I was kind of coming up and coming through. So my family and I spent a lot of time with him because Denver was kind of in my final 3 when I was going through that recruiting process. We spent a lot of time with him and George Gwozdecki out at DU. And so I kind of knew apps at for him, even a young age. He was in his early 30s, maybe, or mid 30s at the time. This is obviously going back quite some time. And then, he goes on to coach at the national team and do other things. But it makes a lot of sense. And I just feel you need somebody who is going to come in there and maybe it's a situation where they need to do a GM and a president And maybe the president has to be more of that marketing figurehead role, somebody the fans love and they trust, like the Flyers did with Keith Jones. Keith Jones, and I know Danny Briere to an
Oh,
extent
yes.
too, but
Oh,
like
yes.
Danny Briere is quiet. Danny does not want to be in front of the microphone. Danny does not want credit for success. Danny wants to work, have his head down, and make the Flyers back to what, they were. Now, Keith Jones is a guy who everybody in this city loves and respects. He was on 94 WIP forever. He's beloved. He's been a TV guy. He's just been a part of this community. Even when he played this like funny style, right, of hockey. And so they bring in this 1-2 punch. One guy that can deal with the fans. And I know for a fact Jonesy's involved in hockey decisions as well, which is a good thing. But then you have Danny behind the scenes operating. Maybe that's where Buffalo needs to go, Jeff. They need to find that 1-2 punch like Philly did.
They found that, Colby, about a decade ago, right, Jeff, with Pat LaFontaine. And I don't remember what the story was, but I believe Pat resigned pretty
Yeah.
early.
He did. That one didn't exactly work out. There's all kinds of stories about why, and that's been one that's been, at least for me anyhow, that one's kind of been like trying to grab a handful of water as you try to figure out, okay, what's the story here.
But he was that beloved Buffalo guy, right? Like
He
that's the person that we're talking about right now.
But that's the thing, like, and Colby mentioned this a second ago, like really good people there and like really good hockey fans that have like a love for anyone that wore that logo, which for me is one of maybe the best logos in the entire NHL. To me, the whole thing comes down to experience on the ice and off the ice. Like the front office doesn't have a lot of experience. I know that Kevin, I do admire people in some ways that have like a firm belief in a decision on how they're going to run things. But then when things don't work, like you need to pivot and you need to change. And sometimes, like I'll give you an example. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen last year was scratched, what was it, the first 8 games of the year? Because Kevyn Adams and Don Granato were convinced that Devon Levi
As was I.
was the guy. And that's okay. But like Devon Levi and Eric Comrie were the battery. And Luukkonen, who's been false started so many times by the Buffalo Sabres organization, he sat there and bided his time. Now, he's turned into a top 10 goaltender in the NHL. Like they kind of got lucky because I don't know how many other players would have been able to put up what Luukkonen went through and still come out the other side, and not just come out the other side okay, but he's distinguished himself when he's healthy as one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. Like I have all day for Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. I think that the guy's fantastic, but the instinct again was this kid is ready, put him in the NHL. He's going to be our number one guy. Devon Levi is now in Rochester where he should be. And I think Devon Levi himself knows that that's where he should be. Get his confidence, get his game, all of it. But it seems as if, and I don't know where this comes from with Kevyn Adams, but this idea that this kid's good, let's get him to the NHL as soon as possible, and the kid will figure it out at the NHL level. The last time I checked, you guys played and I didn't. The NHL wasn't a development league. Like that's not where, like, sure, like you can learn things while you're through the NHL, but that is not a development league. The American Hockey League is the finishing school for hockey players. And if you go up and down the lineup of the Buffalo Sabres, there are too few players that have spent too little time in the finishing school in the NHL, and that is the American League. And then again, like everyone around the front office, it's all outside of Carmanos. It's all the story of inexperience. I don't mind giving first timers a chance. That's great. But you can't have an entire organization full of, and there was one thing, people have pointed this out to me as well. The documentary, I think it was called Blue and Gold, the behind the scenes documentary that the Buffalo Sabres did. There's one scene, and I believe you can still find this on YouTube, where Taylor Hall's groups, that would have been Cortex, called Kevyn Adams about Taylor Hall joining the Buffalo Sabres and Kevyn Adams, and they show the conversation between Adams and Pegula, And Adams is saying, like, listen, if we're talking about Taylor Hall, we're not just talking about the playoffs. We're talking about the Stanley Cup. And I remember saying to myself, like, whoa, whoa, whoa. If like that's the belief, then there's big problems here with the Buffalo Sabres. Now, I love Taylor Hall, and boy, did Taylor Hall have a great game last night.
Yeah.
Sorry, bud.
No, it's okay.
But like,
He was really nice to talk to after.
you're not talking about the Stanley Cup just because you're adding that one player.
Yeah.
But again,
But
like that just sort of betrays an experience.
one thing I actually wanted to add to that too about the NHL not being a development league. We were having this debate, Colby and I, probably like 3 weeks ago. And I actually asked Ryan Warsofsky, I asked him that question, like, do you think it's true that the NHL is not a developmental league? And this is what he said. I have the quote right here from Warsofsky. I think it is a developmental league. It's a hard league to develop in. I will say that. You're based on your wins and losses, so you have to understand both sides of the coin a little bit. There's going to be speed bumps throughout the way. And in particular, this is about Macklin and Will Smith. Mac and Will have hit those speed bumps at times. At times, you can see their skill and their future come out, but it's a hard league to never mind develop in, but to play in and to win in. And I thought that was a pretty interesting spin on it.
Can I jump in on that one?
Yeah,
I think
it's a different scenario, obviously.
I get it. I think what he's talking about are very specific types of hockey players, though. Like you look at, Kevyn Adams' background, like he was there for Taves and Kane. Like these are like for players of that level of skill. Yeah, you know what? You can swim in those waters. You can say, okay, you know what? We're developing at the NHL because we are at a level in our game already that we're ready to learn the lessons that the NHL is going to teach us.
Mhm.
My issue with the Buffalo Sabres is they didn't have enough guys get to that level before they got into the NHL, like Macklin Celebrini. Like I remember like Nathan McKinnon, it took him about, I remember it was like 29 games until he finally figured it out. It was like that quick, like 30 games. All of a sudden you see the Nathan McKinnon that we saw in Halifax. To me, for the Buffalo Sabres is you didn't have enough kids get to the level where they could legitimately use the NHL to take that next step. I mean, look at Yuri Slavkovsky.
Yeah.
In his first season, like right away, like this kid's going to be really good. This kid's going to be awesome. But every time he's on the ice, he's getting clobbered. Like this guy needs some time in Laval.
Yeah.
So I agree with Warsofsky about certain types of, and the ones that he mentioned, like just super elite players.
Yeah. And listen, Johnny, let's also call a spade with Ryan. And I'm not suggesting you're not. Listen, Ryan's come on our show before. Our audience knows how we feel about Ryan, and I've talked about the close history that him and I have together, between him and our families. But he's come into the NHL to a full rebuild as an assistant coach with a guy that who has been dubbed as a rebuild coach with David Quinn. And he comes from the American League and the East Coast League, which are development leagues. So, he doesn't have a ton of head coaching experience. And again, he's not really right now being judged on wins and losses. He's being judged on how are his top guys developing and how are the young players developing. So
yeah, that's a good point.
He's in a very different situation. And look, Will Smith probably could use time in the American League. Like Jeff started this whole conversation with is, when is a player ever overdeveloped in the American League? Look at Lucas Reichel in Chicago. Like he finally looks comfortable playing in the NHL, even though it's as a fourth liner. He was in and out of the American League. How about Marco Rossi? Like, let's give Bill Guerin, let's give Bill Guerin incredible props for how patient they were. They didn't ditch the kid. They didn't trade him. They gave him time. Then they gave him an NHL spot. It wasn't working out. Go back, figure it out in Iowa. Now look at how effective this kid is. And we were talking about Detroit earlier. And like, if there's one thing that Yzerman has done well, and you look at the history, even when he was in Tampa, he doesn't rush guys like Edvinson, Berg, like all of these guys were first round picks that are played 2-3 seasons in the American League. And I go back to the pendulum has swung, and we're living in more of an immediate gratification world now than we even did. Like I go back to, it's 2010, right? It's my junior season in college. I'm a second round pick. Kevin Shattenkirk's a first round pick. All right. And they wouldn't even consider bringing either of us to the big club right away. And this is after All-American seasons at BU. Both of us, we were both All-Americans. We had both just scored, 35, 40 points all right, at BU our sophomore year or junior years after coming off of a sophomore national championship. And granted, he only played like 8 or 9 games in the American League before going on to having an all-star Olympian. Like, for his career was insane. They wouldn't even consider bringing him. Forget me, even him. It was like, nope, you're going to Lake Erie. You're going to start there. And that's just how this works. And now 3rd round picks burn a year and go right to the NHL because, and they might play 9-10 games and then back, but it's the immediate gratification in the NHL has gone through the roof.
So
Colby, oh, sorry, Jeff.
No, can make really quick. I think we live in a society where I've mentioned this on the show the other day. We live in a society where technology has given us an unreasonable feeling about how quickly things can change. Right? It's not just, oh, you know what? Buffalo Sabres need a software update, then everything's going to be fine. Well,
By the way, is that
not.
an iPhone 3? That looks like a pretty old iPhone you're rolling with there. I'm a little.
It's a 14. Dude, 14.
That looks like it might be 14 years old, Jeff. I only see 2 cameras on that thing. Like,
it's not a flip.
You're living in
the
digital world right now, right? I mean, like,
your headphones still have wires.
Attention. Actually, they do. I'm still that guy.
Jeff, I was going to accuse you of soft tampering today, but now I'm thinking it's probably not soft tampering because you're not technologically savvy enough for soft tampering. I think it's probably hard. I bet if we looked at your email right now, there's probably a paper trail of you tampering with our chat all over your email address right now. So,
clearly.
I mean, 100%. I can't believe our chat isn't live today to hear that, but now I'm starting to think there wasn't soft tampering and it was legitimately hard tampering, Johnny.
I am the man technology forgot. Trust me.
I do want to go deeper into this topic, Colby, because I know there's something you want to talk about. But before I do, I just want to give a quick word to our sponsor, Proraso, which is the most complete choice for shaving and beard care, made in Italy since 1948. Proraso has been a staple of Italian culture and barbershops globally for 4 generations. So get 15% off at Proraso-USA.com with our promo code Hockey15. In all caps, Hockey15. And while we were talking about Bill Guerin just a second ago, Colby,
I know. This was where my next comment
was. This was the perfect transition because you threw in a Michael Russo tweet into our chat yesterday. And do you want me to read the tweet or do you want to read it and get into it?
No, throw it up and I'll go through the tweet. I think Vic, you have the tweet, correct?
We don't know what Vic is up to this morning. We have no idea.
We really don't. So Johnny, why don't you read the tweet and then let's talk about it?
Okay, so this was from friend of the show, Michael Russo, who covers the Minnesota Wild for The Athletic, one of our favorite reporters and writers in the NHL. And this is what he said. John Hines says the Minnesota Wild had a good meeting with David Jiricek before assignment to Iowa. The plan has been to start him there, but Wild wanted him to first be around and to practice with his new teammates. Colby, your thoughts?
So, we just gave him credit, Bill Guerin, for what he did with Marco Rossi. And I got to tell you, in my opinion, this is brilliant what they did with Jiricek. And the reason it's brilliant is because we know what the discourse and the issues were. We know how the player is viewed by others and views himself. And so for them to bring him in and say, look, this is what it's all about here. John Hines is a very specific type of guy. Huge fan of John Hines. The way he operates, the way he rolls, he gets more out of his teams. Like, he's one of these guys that gets 10, 15% more out of his groups always. But to bring Jiricek in as a young player and to make him feel good and to make him feel love and to make him feel wanted, but then to also have the balls to say, look, we're not just going to hand you the keys to the kingdom because we think you're a part of the future, but back to Jeff's original comment, you need to ripen your game. So the way that they handled this, Jeff, I think masterfully.
I could not agree more with this. This one is first of all, I agree with you on John Hines, and I don't think it should be lost on anybody that Taylor Hall enjoyed a Hart Trophy season under John Hines. I agree that he gets the most out of players. I think this move is done in concert with Bill Guerin, and I think the key to all of it is communication. I don't think for 1 second that Guerin or Hines would have welcomed David Jiricek to the Minnesota Wild and filled him up with, look at you. It's you and Faber on the right side. This is going to be incredible. You're jumping in with Minnesota. We're a top team in the Western Conference. You got a big spot. I think probably from day one, the conversation was, we're going to get you there. We're going to get you there at a time when you are going to stay and you're never going back to the American Hockey League again. It is our job to get you there. We're done with blocking. We're like, because I think we can all recall with the Columbus Blue Jackets, one of the things, and this was probably a frustration for Jiricek, is all of a sudden when he was ready to take that next step, all of a sudden they sign a couple of defensemen in free agency, and you're Jiricek, and you say, well, now I'm blocked. I'm sure the conversation was, look, we are not blocking you here. There's no more hurdles. We need to get you to a place where when you join the Minnesota Wild, you don't go back to the American Hockey League. It is our job to do that. And look, you guys played. What's the one thing you crave more than anything else as a player outside of ice time? Communication and honesty. And I really do believe that Bill Guerin and John Hines operate from that position.
Yeah,
so David Jiricek will go to the American Hockey League and say, look, at least I know what the plan is. Because there's nothing more frustrating than going to the American Hockey League and saying, I don't know when I'm going to get a call, or I don't know what the plan is for me. I'm going to play another game. I'm going to do another practice. I'm going to get on the bus and et cetera. I got to go pick up my dry cleaning. At least for him now, he has a plan and he knows where he's going to fit and he can see his spot and the path in front of him is clear and he can see it. I absolutely love this move by Minnesota. Great job.
But like you said, he went to a team that's winning right now, where Columbus, since he's been there, it's been a bit of a disaster. So I think when you go to a team and you're a 6th overall pick, you kind of expect to be a part of that change, right? Like you're brought in there to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Where Minnesota right now, he's not traded there to help them now. It's like you said, it's a different tone.
Everything about the Minnesota Wild to me, and listen, this year I look at this year is bonus year. What they're doing, everything around the Minnesota Wild is built really to quote unquote start next season.
Yeah, because they get all their money back.
They get their cap space back, right? All of it. I got to hand it to Bill Guerin. He has really done a masterful, and he's never used that. The one thing I admire, he's in any conversation I've ever had with him, he's never used that as an excuse. That is our reality. This is where we swim. This is the bathing suit we're going to wear. This is our team. We have this was our decision. We're going to live with it and work around it. They've never used it as an excuse or a crutch, but everybody else has. They don't have to, because we all look at it and go man, how do you skate with $14 million tied behind your back? Holy smokes, this is ridiculous. Everything to me is built for next season for the Minnesota Wild. Whatever they can do this year, whatever they can achieve, how high they can get, whatever they can do in the playoffs, to me, bonus. That's great.
Yeah.
Everything really starts with Minnesota next year. And Bill Guerin's got this team to a great spot. And I'm glad you brought up Marco Rossi earlier.
Yeah.
Because I don't know.
Prime example.
When he played in the OHL with Ottawa, I don't know that I'd ever seen a kid that worked harder than Marco Rossi. That kid was an absolute beast on and off the ice.
Yeah. And he's a guy who he could get it done in the American League, but it took him extra time. He'd come up, he'd realize where he was still deficient, he'd go back, and he didn't put his tail between his legs. And I wonder if that has to do, you use the word communication, because look, Bill Guerin, it seems remembers what it's like to be on the other side of the table for those types of meetings as a player. And maybe Bill Guerin is top of the 1% of the 1% as a hockey player, right? I mean, he was an Olympian, a Team USA guy, an all-star. So those guys always have a little bit of a different experience than the more normal players. But look, I remember sitting in those meetings at the end of training camp with Don Sweeney and Peter Chiarelli, and they literally said, and they looked 3 of us in the eye, myself and Matt Barkowski and Steven Kampfer, and they said, the 3 of you are at the same spot right now. So we're going to rotate you guys for the first few months of the season. You're each going to get a batch of games, and we're going to see who takes it. And then it never happened. It literally never happened. And nobody ever said anything to us. And we'd be like, well, Barkowski and I at least would be like, did they forget? Are they just avoiding us now? What's going on? And so I just wonder, how much of the success of some of these guys, do you really have to give the credit to Bill Guerin and his staff, on communicating with these young guys? Because it really is important.
Every manager has their own style, and let's not lose sight of one thing here. Jarmo I know Don Waddell's the GM now, but Jarmo Kekalainen was the general manager of the Columbus Blue Jackets when David Jiricek was drafted and brought into the organization. Now, he has a very specific way of communication and in a very specific way how he views players. His big thing has always been sometimes the team has the hammer, sometimes the player has the hammer. When we have the hammer, we're going to use it, as we expect when players have the hammer, they're going to use it, i.e., Bobrovsky says he's not going to resign. He's going to walk away. He used the hammer. Artemi Panarin, same way. Other times in contract negotiations and conversations, Jarmo Kekalainen has been very blunt and almost emotionless with his decisions. Like, that's just his management style. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying, like, that is how Jarmo Kekalainen conducts business. And we all know Bill Guerin as well. We all know that Bill Guerin's kind of got like he has a different touch, and he's an easier communicator than like Jarmo is a very cut and dry, black
They're
and
Finnish.
white.
That's how
He's
those
very,
guys are.
this
He's
is
very
this
Finnish.
this is the way it is, period, and this is the way it's going to be, etc. That's not Bill Guerin. Bill Guerin has a different way of communicating, and there's an ease of communication that Bill Guerin has that for some Jarmo Kekalainen wouldn't. Like, some people just like that black and white Jarmo Kekalainen. This is the way it is. Okay, and that's fine. Others don't. But I don't know anyone who's walked away from a conversation with Bill Guerin and said, "Well, that was awful."
No,
Like, you guys
never.
talk to Bill Guerin. It's like, oh, this is
He's
a
the
cool
man.
conversation with Bill
But
Guerin.
you walk away
He's
and
the
you go,
man.
this guy's a beauty. He's
Yeah.
amazing. I'd love to play for this guy. And then, you pair him with John Hines, who is tough. Like, John Hines holds players accountable, but in a way where players, they want to go through a wall for him.
Yeah.
Like,
Ask Taylor Hall.
Yeah,
Ask Taylor Hall.
he gets the best out of guys, and I witnessed it at the national team 20-something years ago, and he's done it in the American. I used to play against his teams in Wilkes-Barre. They sucked to play against, Jeff. You knew when you went into Wilkes-Barre and he was the head coach, they were going to block a lot of shots. They were going to finish a lot of hits. They were going to back pressure the puck, extremely difficult. Like, you just knew you were in for a long night when you played against his teams. And, even seeing him in when he was in Nashville, and I would talk to, whether it was Tyson Barrie or some of the other guys that were around that team, coming into Chicago, guys liked him. Even when they were losing, guys stayed with him. He never quite lost the group. He never quite lost the locker room. And I'm kind of surprised with Barry Trotz's coaching style, how he was as a coach. I'm surprised he didn't give John Hines more of a run as coach there. And that does nothing, listen, Andrew Burnett is like, I'm just saying, knowing the personalities involved, I'm surprised that he didn't say, you know what? Let me give this a little bit of a longer runway here and see, and then almost not start my clock as far as how many head coaches I get to hire if you're Barry Trotz. Like, I was surprised when he let him go. I remember when Frank broke that and he was telling me about that, because I think it was the summertime when that move was made. And I remember being like, I thought that would have been something that could have worked out between those two.
Well, while we're on the topic of head coaches, I've been holding in this question for about 50 minutes. And
we've been doing the show for about 50 minutes.
Yeah, and I really want to get both of your opinions now, because it's going to become a conversation here today, I'm sure. I know Jeff loves the stat that since the Ilitch family took over the Red Wings, they haven't fired a head coach midseason.
One. I was wrong about that. It's one. It's
one,
Harry Neal
really?
after 1983. Harry Neal. Neal after 30 games. But this is very, very much unlike. I was reminded quickly after I said that. Like, what about Harry Neal? I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, Harry. But yeah, once the Ilitch family has done it.
Well, I'm happy you were able to correct yourself here on the show. But
I didn't correct myself. Someone else did it for me. Thanks, everybody.
After the Red Wings come back and win last night in Buffalo, is Laviolette's seat now the hottest in the NHL over a guy like Derek Lalonde? Because this conversation is going to start. It has to, because you look at this team right now and whatever Peter's saying to them, and I don't know if I blame the coach here, nothing's resonating. And like Colby always says, you can't fire all the players. So at what point do we see this change? Because the answer is just not there.
But here's the interesting thing about that. Somewhere Gerard Gallant is saying to himself, see, I told you, it's not the coaching. Like, what's the common denominator here, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, so you make the move on Laviolette. What if it doesn't change? Like the same point that I just made about Gerard Gallant. Like at a certain point, you have to say, okay, so we've made a big trade. We've made the coaching change in the past. We've locked up the future in net with, the greatest goaltender in the NHL right now, Igor Shesterkin. I know that it's a lot easier to fire the coach.
Mhm.
I get it, and do the reset.
Is that the
At a
easy way
certain
out?
point, for a lot of teams it is, but I think salary cap, like the one thing that someone mentioned to me coming out of the lockout of 0405, he said, watch what's going to happen now. The salary cap is bad. In some senses, it's bad for players because it pits player versus player for the money that's on the table for the team. But he said, this is going to be really bad for coaches. I said, how's the salary cap going to be bad for coaches? He said, well, teams can't trade their way out of problems now.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't even make trades. What's the easiest thing to do now is fire your coach. Like, you're capped out. This guy makes too much money. Trades are hard to make. He said, you watch what's going to happen. Coaches are going to be the ones that suffer because there's a salary cap in the NHL. I've never forgotten about that. And over the last few years, we've really seen that come to fruition. Now, I don't like to use the word fair because I don't believe in the word. I think that there's no such thing as the word fair. I teach my kids this: you only get what you negotiate, and get yourself in a position to do something. The easy way out is to fire the coach, but I don't know that addresses the problem here, even though I know the history of Peter Laviolette is the first season is supercharged and then it starts to deteriorate from there.
Pretty
I
quick
just don't.
though. This has
I
been a
know.
quicker deterioration than normal, even though.
So what does that lead you to believe then?
Yeah,
Is it like, again, like, is it Peter Laviolette or is it the players?
We know those
Again,
players
like
are
they've
capable of playing, though. That's the issue.
with their new unless you think Joel Quenneville is the answer, or there's somebody out there that you've already got a target on that you think is not just going to fix today, but is going to be better long term. I think they need to they need to shake up their roster. They have not shook up their roster, Johnny, as you know, in years.
That's not true. We had Kane and Tarasenko 2 years
But
ago.
those are trade deadline deals, and those are short term, and I think Drury learned a lesson there at that trade deadline of you can't overdo. I personally think
But I don't agree with they haven't shooken up their roster and like they make a crazy move almost every deadline, it seems. Last year they brought in like 3 different guys. They're a deadline acquisition team. That's what
but
they are.
But as far as the core of the team, I think what Colby's saying is right. Like, as far as like the key
they've been
guys,
more successful bringing in ancillary third depth pieces than when they brought in Kane and Tarasenko, guys at the end of their careers. And no disrespect, but it's just a reality. I mean, look at Detroit right now. I think they need to make a bigger move. I think Chris Drury also said, I need to let the dust settle now for this team a little bit. And I know there's a lot of fan pressure. But again, I don't think Dolan could wake up from a nap today in the afternoon and decide to fire everybody. I mean, seriously.
Yep.
Like, he could be like, Drury out, this guy out, Glenn Sather's back. Like, you just, like, who knows? I mean, I'm not kidding. Like, the guy is erratic. But I think that they need to make a move or two, and they need to do it now. Don't wait till the trade deadline. Do it now, right? And before they fire Peter Laviolette, unless you think Joel Quenneville wants to come to New York, or he's available to come to New York, or whatever, and you want to make that decision. I'm not saying I think that's, or I know that's the right one. I just, who you getting right now? Like, who's changing the New York Rangers right now? I just don't see it.
So here's how goofy it's gotten for me, Johnny. I can only imagine what it's been like for you. You know what I spent yesterday morning doing?
What?
Trying to figure out if Mika Zibanejad is still using the 2S Pros or he's having a hard time adjusting to the mocks, because like something looks off. Like, I'm trying to figure, like, okay, is there like any like equipment issues? Is there a skate issue he's having a hard time adapting to? And then I find out that he's still using the 2S Pros, and I'm like, okay, so scratch that one. But there are just too many players that for some reason just look off.
Yeah.
Like, you guys know what it's like to adjust to like new skates, for example. Like, oh man, they don't make my old model, and it affects your game. Like, it does. Like, I think that's one of the things we don't talk to hockey players enough, like adjusting to things like new skates specifically. But he looks off. So many guys look off. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm pretty sure that the answer is not, let's just shuffle in a new coach, unless you're bringing in like the ghost of Toe Blake or something, or in this case, Joel Quenneville, because I think we're all sort of wondering too about, because Quenneville is the wild card here, right? And Quenneville is interested in wins and chasing legacy and most wins of all time and Hall of Fame and all these types of things. Is it, does that shadow loom large over Detroit? Does that shadow loom large over the New York Rangers? Does that shadow loom large over maybe another team that we're not even thinking about here? I don't know, but to me, Quenneville is the wild card in all of this.
It's been pretty. I actually don't even know the word. Uninspiring, I guess, would be the word that I've been using for the Rangers the past couple weeks.
Well, I think
What?
it's again, we talked about the different stages of grief for a fan base, and you're kind of probably somewhere down the middle of that track. And the funny thing is wherever you start, whether it's anger, usually you finish with that anger. Like you go through the empathy, the sympathy, and you make your way around the pendulum, and then you get back to it, Johnny. So look, I know you've got a very busy day ahead of you,
Yeah.
Johnny. So I want to keep this moving because there is one other topic that I do really want to talk about.
Sure.
And that is the Colorado Avalanche and what they did yesterday. We know the GM meetings are going out. I don't think we're going to have time to get into Frank's article today where he talked about Alexander Ovechkin and what they're planning there. And I think that's a better topic to wait until we have our chat back tomorrow anyway, because they're as the fan group, I want to know what they think about the whole Ovechkin plan. So we'll table that for today. But let's talk about the Colorado Avalanche. And Jeff, you seem to have your ear to the ground with a lot of the managers and a lot of the way that these teams are working. And so I'm just curious, like, how long was this trade potentially in the making? And I saw Greerzy's comments about the offer was just too good to be true to walk away from.
I think that the Avalanche have been thinking about this move even before they picked up Wedgwood. And they finally got to a place and came to a deal. Like the one thing that I will say about the San Jose Sharks, like they're in a position where they can pivot quickly, right? Like the New York Rangers, we were just talking about them, like they're not in a position where they can really pivot quickly on a lot of things. San Jose can. Like San Jose and Colorado are in different positions in their winning cycle right now. Colorado, it's right now, obviously. San Jose, it's still eyes to the future. You can sell two things. You can sell wins or you can sell hope. Colorado are selling wins and the San Jose Sharks are selling hope. This one has probably been in the back of Colorado's mind for a while. And I think like they've looked at the goalie landscape, and maybe even this goes as far back as when the San Jose Sharks made the move to bring in Yaroslav Askarov. And we looked and said, okay, so what's that going to mean for Blackwood and Vanacek here? Like, does that mean that we might have a chance to wiggle Blackwood away from the San Jose Sharks? So I think this one's probably been in the works for a while. I do have to applaud. Like this is one of those. It works for both teams because both teams are in different positions. Like like Kovalenko is going to be like a really good middle to bottom six player for the San Jose Sharks. He's a little bit older. He's 25 years old, making his way through the NHL now. They get a second round pick in the process as well. And look, even though Mackenzie Blackwood hasn't played in the playoffs in the NHL, he's done a really good job putting his game back together after, and we all know what happened during the pandemic and Mackenzie Blackwood and the New Jersey Devils and how he fell out of favor and everything after that. He's done a really good job putting his game back together here and getting himself in a position where a team that has Stanley Cup aspirations says, you know what, that's our guy, or this could be our guy. Like there are some teams, and we saw this with Colorado, that don't need Shesterkin to win the Stanley Cup. They just need someone that can make saves, so all of their work isn't undone by a goaltender that's hard to hit. And we've seen too many goaltenders recently for the Colorado Avalanche that are hard to hit. Right. Yeah. And they've good on Colorado. They've totally redone their crease. Two new netminders in there. Avalanche isn't a team that needs, a 934 goaltender to win a Stanley Cup.
Right.
And we'll see what happens. But I kind of applaud both teams on this one. This was a deal that made sense for both.
Okay, so 2 questions off of that. Johnny, quickly, because this is going to be the poll question on DFO Live today, and I'm sitting in with Tyler Yaremchuk on DFO Live. We now know where Jeff stands on this, and this is also on the Daily Faceoff X account, so you can go vote there as well. Who won the Blackwood trade is the question, Johnny, and here are the options. Avs overpaid, Sharks sold low, or it's a win-win. I think Jeff is in the win-win camp. I'm in the win-win camp as well. Johnny, which camp do you sit in?
Can I add a caveat quickly?
Go for it. Yeah.
What?
If the Avs win the Stanley Cup, then it's a home run.
fair
asterisk. I am looking up Mackenzie Blackwood playoff stats. I don't believe he's played in the playoffs.
No, he hasn't.
He has not.
So I don't know if we know yet.
Yeah, because the question is right now, grade the trade. I
think the Avalanche win because they got rid of a problem, which was Georgiev. Georgiev was a problem.
Okay, so it's an Avs win for the trade. And the last question I'm going to ask you, Jeff, before we let you go on your day, and then we kind of finish the business end of our show here, because this is something Frank and we yell at each other. It's like the hottest button topic that him and I get into it with each other. And I'll give Vic a little bit of credit, even though he's had a rough day today, because he put this in our pre-show thought processes. Are you in the camp of pay the goalie? Are you in the camp of scrap it together and try to find a crease that works for a low amount of money and spend all your money elsewhere? Because I yell and scream and I say, if you have a Shesterkin, give him the bag. And everybody else has to do it the other way because there's only a few Igor Shesterkins. Where do you sit on that topic?
I'm in Camp Colby on this one. If you have the guy, like there are just too many cliches, but the cliches are really true. Like if you look at the history, go back to the 1970s and Ned Harkness when he ran the Detroit Red Wings, he used to say, we need to change the name of the sport from hockey to goalie because that's all that really matters here. All the Alain Vigneault, if your goalie's better than my goalie, you win. If my goalie's better than your goalie, I win. Like if you have an Igor Shesterkin, you pay that player. Like honestly, just think to yourselves, like everybody watching, everybody listening right now, think to yourselves, how many elite goaltenders are there in the NHL? There are not that many. So if you have one, hold them sacred. There is a direct line you can draw between successful goaltenders and successful coaches. Here comes the other cliche, show me a good goalie and I'll show you a good coach. If you have them, you pay them. You should never have to. Kelly Rudy would always catch me on this one and say, hold on a second. Whenever I'd say, team, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but they have this goalie. Yeah, but they have this goalie. He would always say, you shouldn't have to apologize for having a great goalie. The last time I checked, the goalie is part of the team. Treat them and pay them accordingly. If you have Shesterkin, give them the bag. You had Carey Price, give them the bag. You have goaltenders like that, pay them. They are, like, put it this way. This is the one that I love, the one cliche that I do love saying about goalies. If you have the goalie, it's 70% of your team. If you don't, it's 100. How many teams have you two guys been on that have been wrecked by bad goaltending? That it didn't matter what you did.
Too often.
Just makes your life miserable. Someone comes down, snaps in too quick over the goaltender's shoulder, and he doesn't budge. And the life goes out of your bench. As opposed to the guy that is keeping you in every single game and keeping you in for 3 periods and giving you, even though you've played like crap for 2 periods, gives you a shot at winning the game in the third. I'll take that guy. And if you're taking that guy, pay that guy. I'm on Camp Colby about this one.
Yeah, and I agree as well. And I hate the people that are like, well, Corey Crawford won cups, Matt Murray won cups, all these average goalies winning Stanley Cups. Well, guess what? Not every team has Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Kane, Taves, Duncan Keith. Like these guys don't grow on trees. So you can't really compare those goalies, when you talk about the guys in McKinnon, Rantanen, Makar, Landeskog.
One of the greatest achievement, one of the greatest things I've ever seen in hockey is what Dominik Hasek was able to do with a very mediocre Buffalo Sabres team. The Buffalo Sabres had no business being in the Stanley Cup final in 1999. Like the things that Hasek was able to do with Buffalo, the things that Hasek, like wherever Dominik, and ultimately ended up winning a Stanley Cup, but when you have the elites, the Patrick Roys, the Marty Brodeurs, the Eddie Belfours, I'll throw into that conversation too. You have these guys. I'm sorry, you pay them. There's no one way to win a Stanley Cup. There's a lot of different ways, and luck is a big part of it, and health is a big part of it as well. Like, I don't think it's right to look at like 2010 and say Antti Niemi, Michael Leighton are your two starting goaltenders here. Whichever one has a nerve to make a save first is going to win the Stanley Cup, and it turned out to be Chicago. Therefore, we shouldn't pay our goaltenders.
Yeah.
I think in that example, yeah, they had Antti Niemi and they won the Stanley Cup. But I don't know. I'm much more comfortable if I know that I've got the stud. Like, look what I mean, Johnny. Look what Shesterkin did last year with the New York Rangers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I was arguing. Look, I was even arguing with people on Johnny's Twitter the other day saying, stop blaming this game on Quick. Okay. Like, Quick is part of the team. If you lose because of your goaltender, you still, your team lost. And I always equate it to starting quarterbacks in the NFL. There's about a dozen of them that everybody else wishes they had. And then everybody else kind of holds their breath on Sundays, not knowing which Jekyll or which Hyde they're going to get in their starting quarterback. I think it's the same thing. There's not enough of them as there is teams. And I think when you have one, you do everything in your power to make sure they stay there. It will make your life as a GM, your career longer. It'll make your tenure as a coach longer. And I laughed about it with my mom. She was just here visiting. My mom is about as tough a grader when it comes to hockey. I think she thinks I played 4 good games in my entire life, and was always the first person to give me shit after a game. And we were laughing because we were watching the Flyers game, and I was kind of telling her about the goaltending issues that they were having, and she's like, I got no time for this anymore. I've moved on past this chapter of goaltending issues since you were a little youth hockey player. So
okay,
I thought that was kind of funny.
Colby, you're a Philadelphia guy, so you know the Philadelphia Flyers well. So did I ever tell you I've ever told you guys my Bobby Clark conspiracy theory about goaltenders?
No, but I'd be interested to hear.
Okay, so listen to this one. Let's get up on the grassy knoll here with your boy Jeffy. So I was always of the belief, like, you look at the Philadelphia Flyers goalie years, Stanley Cup years, 74 and 75, the Philadelphia Flyers win the Stanley Cup. We talk a lot about Bobby Clark and Leach and Bill Barber, Rick McLeish, like really like high-end superstar players. The guy that won the Stanley Cup for the Philadelphia Flyers was Bernie Parent. Both those years, Conn Smythe trophies, like all of it. Like, Bernie Parent was probably the best angle goaltender in the history of the game. My theory has always been, because we saw Bobby Clark won the Philadelphia Flyers for the longest time, and they always went cheap on their goaltenders, right? Always. They had a chance to sign Cujo. Now we're not going to spend that money. We're going to go with John Van Beesbrook. That was one of the big ones. My conspiracy theory was that Bobby Clark was always trying to prove that you didn't need an elite level goaltender to win a Stanley Cup as long as you had strong centers. Now, if you look at the Philadelphia Flyers historically, they never drafted and developed defensemen, and they never had elite level goaltenders after Bernie Parent. My conspiracy theory is this was Bobby Clark trying to prove that as long as you had centers, hi Bobby Clark, you could win the Stanley Cup. The goalie was meaningless. Don't need to draft and develop defensemen, because you look at the history of the Philadelphia Flyers, they never drafted and developed defensemen.
Jeff, we love you. We appreciate your time today. We'll be bothering you in the chat today at 3 p.m. for sure. If it works, hopefully it works. Well, listen, your producer isn't Vic, so my guess is it will work.
I listen. I worked alongside Vic for a number of years in Toronto radio. I got all day for Vic. You guys get off Vic's back.
We got one rule here. With you too? We have one rule here, Jeff. It's all Vic's fault.
When in doubt, blame the producer. Dodge and deflect. I don't have any mirrors in front of me. Nothing can be because of me.
Exactly. All right, Jeff.
But there's a buck to be passed.
Have a good day. We'll catch you at 3:00 today.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff.
Be good.
All right, so let's get into our bet.
I feel like we could have done a 4-hour show today.
Yeah, we always can, and that's the most disappointing part when we don't have our chat. But today, yeah, I mean, listen, we went into topics that I don't even think we had planned today. Also, Sheldon Keefe is on Leafs Morning Take, which is pretty big news. That's awesome. I'll listen to that one today too, because the Devils play the Leafs tonight. So that's a big game.
So
Wow, that's a
check that
big get
out.
for the Leafs Morning Take boys.
Leafs Nation YouTube, part of the same family that we're on. So, all right, get to Bet365. And then I know you have a busy day. You got to get to Boston. You're doing a game tomorrow night at BU.
Yes, at UMass actually, but UMass versus BU, which I'm very excited about. But tonight's bet of the night, and also I apologize for yesterday's bet of the night because as soon as Igor was announced the starter, I texted Vic and I was like, "This game's going under." Like I knew the over was not hitting last night, and I apologize. I meant to put that out there and I didn't. So shame on me for doing so. But tonight we're going with the Columbus Blue Jackets money line -110. They are home against the Philadelphia Flyers. We haven't bet on Columbus in a while, but the Flyers have lost 3 straight games. Like we just talked about with Jeff, their goaltending is a disaster. And Columbus actually scores a lot of goals. Kent Johnson is on fire. The Blue Jackets just won on the road in Winnipeg by the score of 4-1. A huge win for Columbus. And they're a team that not everyone pays a lot of attention to. We should probably start paying more attention to them because they do have a pretty high-flying offense and a lot of young talent that should be talked about a little bit more. So that's, something that's on us. We have to hold ourselves a little bit more accountable when we talk about Columbus. And tonight we're going to pay attention and watch them. So Blue Jackets money line -110. That's the bet of the night. And hopefully they can take care of business on home ice against the Flyers.
Yeah. Well, look, good show today, Johnny. Again, never the same energy without our chat. We've got a couple of good topics that we have for tomorrow. I don't know do the Blackhawks play tomorrow? Are they're back against maybe the Islanders tomorrow, I would think, or the Devils?
They play Thursday.
Okay, so maybe we'll try to get Pat tomorrow morning. It might be in transit to practice. And then we'll just keep making our way through the week. I'm glad the NHL's given us some stuff to talk about. We appreciate Jeff Marek's time as always. Make sure you like this episode, even though it's not live. The more you guys hit the like button, the more it runs us up the algorithm. So don't forget to do that. Otherwise, we'll be right back here with you 9 a.m. tomorrow. We appreciate you rolling with us as always.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.